Maybe you'll detach yourself from your emotions once a week, twice a week, and then once a day. But you have thousands of thoughts a day. So you're shifting through 70,000 thoughts a week, and one of them you detach yourself from. But then eventually you're at the point where you're doing it every day. It's just the process of building a habit like anything else. For me, all it comes down to is learning to build the habit of, in the moment when you're feeling some sort of negative emotion or any emotion, of realizing that you are not the emotion, whatever it is that you're feeling, good or bad. Those are just the chemicals flowing through this meat vessel. Your mind is something completely different. Your spirit is something that's completely different. Consciously, you know that you're not. Because when you feel something, you know that that's not you. You're not the anger that you're feeling. It's just an emotion based on the biochemicals flowing around your body. When you're in the moment and you decide to consciously think that, that's when you create the space. That's not me. That's not me. That's not me. Yeah. Over time, separating yourself from the emotion, your mind from the emotion, your soul from the emotion, your spirit from the emotion, that over time is just going to create that long-term peace. Call it Uber.
Call it Uber. I don't give a fuck how you get home. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode number 73 of the Conscious Cast. As advertised, I'm your host, Cal, along with my huge, swole, absolute big bodybuilder slash powerlifter, Mr. Jason Scalora. What makes you happy?
Damn it, you had me there for a second.
What makes you happy?
Progress.
Okay.
What makes you happy?
I was about to say some really dumb shit. I would probably say, no, same as you, progress, you know. But it's like weird because like happiness is. I was like, because one time I posted this thing on my Instagram story. It was about like Eckhart Tolle. Actually, I could probably. So this is an Eckhart Tolle quote. He said, "Don't seek happiness. If you seek it, you won't find it because seeking is the antithesis of happiness." Okay, and so someone replied to me and they said, "I wouldn't agree with you on this one. I think seeking is what brings happiness, but not seeking happiness directly." Like you said, it's like a byproduct, you know? So It's like you do something in itself for itself, right? And as a byproduct of that, you experience happiness, right? Whether that be like satisfaction, whether that be just, you know, the endorphins running through your brain, you know, the dopamine, the like, you know? And then I said, I think it depends on how you define happiness. I think what I think Eckhart is pushing on here is more of a conscious state of peace without thought. And what you're pressing on is more of doing an action in itself, which as a byproduct breeds happiness. He is more so discussing the being domain while you are discussing the becoming domain. I agree with both stances. That's what I said. Right. And that's kind of like my view on it, right? Because and for those who don't know, like this being state, what Eckhart Tolle is more so touching on is when you're in a state of beingness, right? When you're aware of your own awareness, right? And you're completely present, right? And you are not caught in your thoughts, right? You're not identifying with your thoughts, right? That state of peace, that state of just presence, right? That state of just awareness of your own awareness is what he would define as happiness, right?
Yeah.
And because like, I think when a lot of people, and this is a big thing too, because I think defining happiness is such a big thing too.
Yeah, it's such
because it's a gray area, right? And it always seems like whenever someone brings up happiness, it's just like it's really hard for someone to concretely say what it is, right? Because it could be either satisfaction, it could be, you know, just experiencing all these endorphins, right? Like to me, like I really don't know what happiness is. Like it's almost like I never feel like I'm experiencing happiness, even though like I am a very generally happy person.
I just don't use the word.
Exactly.
I try not to use the word anymore.
Yeah.
The goal for me is peace.
Yeah.
Really. And peace is detachment. Right.
Yeah.
And actually, we talked about this on FaceTime the other day. Of like, for me, the ultimate goal is to be in third person in my life as much as possible. Right. And we talked about this when we were, I don't remember.
GTA example.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a video game called Grand Theft Auto. And when you're driving in GTA, the camera angle on the video game is in third person. So the view you see isn't like first person, your hands on the wheel. You see the car in third person driving around. It's because it's a video game. But you could shift your viewpoint to the POV of being in the car driving. And if you've played that video game or you've played any car video games, you will know that the second you go from third person to first person, it gets way harder. You start crashing into shit, whatever. But the second you go into third person, you could swerve around traffic, go 110 miles down the fucking side streets and make all these turns and swerve around. But it's because you're detached, right? You're not in it. You're out of it. But the same thing applies for your emotional states of being. When every time you feel some negative emotion, if you're so embodied by that emotion, you get angry, so then you become anger, you put yourself in the driver's seat of that emotion, it screws you over because it's so hard to manage it because you put yourself in it. But the second you can allow yourself to have the emotion in your body, but detach your mind from whatever's going on, then you can be the observer of your emotions, the observer of your thoughts, the observer of what's going on in your reality, rather than the person that's feeling it and existing within it. Because once you do that, that separation is what creates that peace. And what, in my estimation, Eckhart Tolle is referring to as happiness, which is how he subjectively defines it. I don't use the word happiness consciously because I think it's too dirty and people don't understand. People think,
exactly.
you look up happiness, you're gonna see fucking a yellow smiley face with the fucking this, which is just so corny. But
say
for
a
me,
piece
it's
is a better way. Piece of it, a better way of saying it. And I think just making that distinction between being and becoming, right?
Yeah.
It's such a big thing too because it's like we're all in a state of becoming. Like it's just how we naturally have been conditioned, you know, especially within our culture. To always want more, you know, to always be striving for goals, to always be striving for standards, right? And it helps with progress, right? It helps us advance and it helps us become more skilled, right? Develop more knowledge and all these things. It's great stuff, right? But it's just like we push it to an extent where we forget that we're whole and complete, right? And that wholeness, that completeness is when we're conscious of that, right? When we're really experiencing that, that's that state of peace, right? That's like when you're really in that realization, right? You're not living according to that realization, or else there would like morality, legality, like all these types of things would not exist, right? Because if we touch on this so much, like just because something's whole and complete doesn't mean that's how we ought to live life. You know what I mean? So it's based on that. But if you can live in that realization, right? Realizing like, okay, I'm the masterpiece, but I'm the work in progress at the same time, right? But you have to be understanding of like when you're striving for these goals, and this is a big thing when it comes to not being as attached to that state of becoming, right? Because if people think there's only the state of becoming, right? Like meaning there's always this margin of error between where I currently am and where the goal is, right? So like there's this gap, right, that you have to go, that you have to still climb the ladder to get to, right, to that level, right? There's always going to be this kind of margin of, I guess you could say error, but like space where you don't feel like you're enough, right? You feel inadequate, right? And when we forget about that being domain, we feel completely inferior, right? We feel completely separate, right? And we never actually understand that we're just way too attached, right? And so with that beingness, right, with that awareness of your beingness while still doing things, right, while still in that becoming state, when you're aware of that beingness without getting caught in the becoming, right, you become a lot more detached, right? And so a lot of it is like, and how I could break it down in a more concrete way is when you're in that third person GTA mode, like where you can see the car, where you can see all these things, that's you being aware of your beingness, right? As opposed to just the driver in that human POV type of angle, right? Just so being able to be aware of that kind of third person angle, right? Being the awareness of being aware of like your emotions, feelings, thoughts, and all that, right? And like how you're whole and complete at the same time too. That allows you to be more detached while you still are attached to some extent, just not as much as you were before. If that makes sense. I know
it does. It does make sense. The question I have, because I'm trying to think about, I don't think I have an answer for this, to be honest. I don't know if you do, but how do you get yourself? Because I can, if I consciously remember in the moment, or like if you like, let's say I get angry at something, and then you tell me, Jason, detach yourself from anger. Immediately I can go into third person. I can just do it. But how do you detach yourself? How do you put yourself in third person? Like after I read The Power of Now and Untethered Soul, that's when I started being able to do it. But I don't know. Did they explain it? I don't even remember what he said.
I mean, like, I don't know exactly what they said, but I know detachment is very interesting because it's not something that happens overnight, right? Sure, you can immediately, like, that awareness of you becoming aware of your emotions, right? That in itself, like you just becoming aware of that is a kind of a detachment in itself, right? But you're no longer engulfed in the emotion, right? Or the feeling or thought, right? You're kind of just like you've taken a step back a little bit. So like you kind of coming out of that state of mind is, I think, a detachment in itself. But to become not completely, but for the most part, be detached, right? And on like a broader scale, to me, that like in my mind and my own experience and from what I've seen, that takes a lot more time, right? So,
but of doing what?
Of doing what? So I think it's you don't place your attention on it as much, right? And
attention on what?
On the issue at hand, because the more, and now I think where I kind of have a question is how do you get to that point where you're not placing as much attention on it? Because the more you place attention on something, right, the more significant it's going to be within your reality, right? The more prevalent it's going to be within your perception, right? And so I'm speaking more so on the end result right now. And I don't, like you said, I don't necessarily, maybe we can unpack this. I don't know, like I'm sure I've come across it before, but, and I was like a lot more well-versed on this in the past. But when you get to that state of detachment, right, you don't care as much, right? You're not focusing on it as much, right? Therefore, it doesn't carry as much weight in your mind, right? And so on that basis, you're detached, right? So it's kind of like it's like I don't know if it's called a black box of reasoning or something like that, right? So it's like you're aware of the end result, right? But you don't know how that necessarily happens, right? So it's like a black box of reasoning is just, I think, it's just like,
I'm trying to think. Like, I don't know what do I do? I don't know even what I do to get myself in that state of peace.
Yeah. Well, I think, obviously it starts with observation, right? Yeah. And then through that observation, I'm not saying I have I'm just kind of like walking through my thoughts right now. Like you make that observation, you're aware of it, right? And then you identify.
Is that just it?
No, because I feel like you start to take steps towards
doing it consistently. But I feel like
because then as you start to do it consistently, that's when it falls out of your attention, right? And it's not as significant to you.
I just feel like
because that's where the detachment really is.
But I feel like maybe this for me, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but it might be the second that the moment that you realize in the moment that you're not the emotion that you're feeling, you're the entity. You're the soul outside of that emotion of the biochemicals flowing through this meat vessel, that's when you detach. And you feel that peace. But that peace is that space.
Yeah. No, yeah. That's a big part of it too. No, I think it's that inner space, right, that you make between. Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you. Because like when you make. Because I think Eckhart Tolle literally says, he was just like, some people just get to a state where they just can't handle the suffering anymore, right? Yeah. And they just give it all up. And they just feel this immense salvation in their bodies, right? Like this complete detachment and just let go of everything. Right. He says that's more rare, but I think a lot of people, when it comes to stuff like this, right, they have that kind of realization that they're not their thoughts, they're not their feelings, right? They're not the emotion that they're currently in, right? Like you said, it does allow for that inner space, right? It does allow for that kind of distance between themselves and the emotion. And as time goes on, they're not as affected by the emotion or the thought, right? But my question is, and what I think is, how do they consistently feel that thought or how do they consistently feel that peace over time? Do they continue to have that realization, or do they move to a place where it just naturally doesn't affect them as much? Do you get what I'm saying or no?
Yeah. So to me, I mean, based on my personal experience with it, is I think you have to understand that it's going to take a lot of time.
Yeah.
Of like, maybe you'll realize it once a week. Mm-hmm. Maybe you'll detach yourself from your emotions once a week, and then twice a week, and then once a day, and then. But you have thousands of thoughts a day, so you're shifting through 70,000 thoughts, let's say, a week, and one of them you detach yourself from. One of these shitty emotions you detach yourself from a week, But then eventually you're at the point where you're doing it every day, and then eventually you're doing it twice a day, and then eventually you're at a point where you're Eckhart Tolle and you're lane. You're not.
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
but you know what I'm saying?
No, yeah.
So it's just the process of building a habit like anything else.
Mm.
But for me, all it comes down to is in the moment, learning to build the habit of in the moment when you're feeling some sort of negative emotion or any emotion, of realizing that you are not the emotion. Whatever it is that you're feeling, good or bad, you're not the emotion.
Yeah.
Those are just the chemicals flowing through this meat vessel. Your mind is something completely different. Your spirit is something that's completely different. But when you in that moment, whether or not you want to think about it spiritually or not, it doesn't really matter. Like you know, like consciously, you know that you're not, because when you feel something, you know that that's not you. It's not like this. You're not the anger that you're feeling. It's just an emotion based on the biochemicals flowing around your body, right? If somebody poked and prodded inside of your brain, and I forget where they were learning about this in one of my classes, where they were talking about they were learning about the brain, and they'd have people awake doing a brain surgery, and if they poke certain parts of the brain or stimulate certain parts of the brain, people will just feel super angry or super happy or whatever, because you could just stimulate parts of the brain, but it's just stimulation. That's all it is. It's not you.
Yeah.
Because so you're gonna tell me like because I'm
experiencing.
poking the part of your brain that makes you angry, that's who you are now because that part's getting poked, or if you're drugged up, that's who you are because you're on fucking perks, so you're pissed off. Like is that who you are? No, like you know that's like we all know that. But when you're in the moment and you decide to consciously think that thought, that's when you create the space. Like that's not me. That's not me. That's not me.
Yeah. And
over time, separating yourself from the emotion, your mind from the emotion, your soul from the emotion, your spirit from the emotion, whatever words you want to put to it, that over time is just going to create that long-term peace.
Long-term peace. Yeah.
But long-term peace doesn't mean that eventually I'm at a point where every single time I feel an emotion, I'm completely separated from it. It just means you do it more times than you don't.
Yeah.
Eventually you get to the point where like most of the time maybe you're separating yourself, or more of the time you're doing it. Maybe it's easier for some and harder for others, but for me, that's how I look at it. Of like, eventually you're going to get to the point where more of the time is spent separated from the emotion.
Yeah, and that just becomes natural, right? Yeah. It just becomes natural over time. And I think it's very interesting because a lot of times in my own experience, like, oh God, you just yesterday I was like, damn, bro, I think so much. It's nuts, dude. Like, and like, I've been along this quote unquote path for such a long time now, like 2-3 years, right?
Yeah.
And I'm still thinking a shit ton, right? Like which inherently there's nothing wrong with, right? I'm overthinking way more than I have to. And it's just like, I've said this so many times in this podcast, but like, you just think you're this image in your head, right? You think you're this person, right? Yeah. And it's just like, it's crazy because when you have that intuitive recognition, right? Or you just say, you have this voice in your head that says like, these thoughts aren't you right now, right? Like these thoughts aren't you right now. Like even though like you're thinking while you're thinking about your thoughts, right? But even in that in itself, it's like this extended awareness, right?
Yeah.
Of your true nature, right?
Yeah.
And on that basis, it's just fascinating because and this goes back to literally what we were just talking about 2 episodes ago. It's just like, we say all this shit, right? But when it comes time to actually implement it, it's so much harder, right? And it's very hard for us to actually implement that advice. And it's really fascinating how we naturally, we still believe like you're Jason, I'm Cal, right? We still believe all these types of things, right? And we still get so caught up in all these emotions, these thoughts, these feelings, right? And it affects us so much, right? And we know the solution, right? And we know what we're supposed to do, right? Or like what we apparently are supposed to do, right? But that's the hardest shit. You know what I mean? And it's just, I'm not saying it's the easiest thing to do, or like we're some type of superior god or whatever. But it's just so much more problems could be solved if we just had that realization in that moment in time.
That's why meditative practices are so powerful. Because like if you journal, or like the immediate visualization that comes to my mind is I watched this video of it's the most popular meditation app. What is it?
Oh, Headspace?
Yes. Oh. And they had a YouTube video, and it was just talking about what meditation actually is. And all it is from this guy's perspective that was talking about it is it's like looking at a busy road, and the busy road are all your thoughts, and all you are is sitting on the side of the road watching all these cars go by, and each of these cars represents one of the thoughts that are running through your busy brain. And what we tend to do when we're meditating is instead of observing the thoughts, we will unconsciously jump into one of the cars.
Yep.
We'll think that thought. We'll allow it to come through, and we're just thinking the thought, and we go down the rabbit holes of thought, and just because that's who we are. We're thinking creatures. But the process of pulling yourself out of the car, once you realize you're in it, once you consciously remember, oh my God, wait, how did I even get here? I was supposed to be focusing on my breath. I was supposed to be focusing on something else. I was supposed to be the observer of my thoughts, not jumping into it. That's the process of being at peace. Not being with your thoughts, just watching them. And becoming better at meditation isn't becoming better at meditation. Becoming better at meditation is becoming better at observing more thoughts rather than jumping in the car of each of these thoughts and allowing yourself to continually just run down this road of thinking, rather than just sitting there and observing.
And Justin, Dr. Good says, he says you're strengthening your attention muscle when you do this type of stuff, right? Like every time you make that realization, right, that you're supposed to be meditating right now, right, rather than diving into your thoughts, right, or like, you know, just naturally, unconsciously getting sucked into each one of your thoughts, right? Every time you make that realization, right, you strengthen your attention muscle, right? So whether that just be in the meditative state, right, which I still experience all the time, right, and I need to get better at, but the more you make that realization in that meditative state, the more you'll be able to make that type of realization in your actual life, right?
Absolutely.
So you can literally make everything a spiritual practice, right? And so I feel like I do this pretty frequently, whether it be focusing on your footsteps, whether it be focusing on your breath while you're walking, right? Or just really any activity what we're doing right now. Like I could focus my attention on my earphones while we're doing this, right? I could focus on just my awareness on my hands, right? Like anything that where you're able to stay mindful of the present moment and like your different awareness that's going on within your current reality, right, will allow you to have that kind of detached state, right, where you're not engulfed in your thoughts, you're not engulfed in the car that's going along the side of the road. Because when you enter that car, right, that chain of thought, right, it's almost like you're daydreaming, right? You're masking out, your eyes are glazed over, right? And you're not present. You're just in this kind of fantasy land of just a mental state where you're just going down a rabbit hole, right? And you're just constantly thinking about all this type of stuff. And what do you know? That type of stuff, those thoughts are the trigger, and you identifying with them are the trigger for immense amount of suffering within your life, right? And it's so fascinating because I feel like a lot of people when it comes to just a lot of, and this can be a general thing across the board, not just within meditation, is what is often put out there, whether it be you're talking to maybe a friend, right? I keep feeling this kind of message, right? That whenever someone gives me advice, right, or I hear like a story in the news or anything that we're like talking about commonly, I always feel like the root cause of the issue is not what they're talking about, because I feel like it's just such a deeper issue that nobody knows about, right?
Like what?
For instance, when it comes to, I would say, like, there's so many examples of it. If it's something when it comes to, I don't know, for example, like the Iraq-Russia war, or not Iraq, Ukraine-Russia war. Like, whenever I hear a story in the news, or just like my teacher in class telling me like what's really going on, right, with this, I just feel like there's something deeper going on that I'm not aware of. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just oftentimes like that's not the. I feel like nobody knows what it's about. Only the select few know what it's about, right? So if you were like this path to meditation, right, so few people know that the root cause of suffering is identification with thought, right? So few people know that. Like I know it, right? You know it. A lot of people know it, but there's a difference between conceptually knowing it and actually doing it on a regular basis, right? 100%. And how many times does that actually come up in conversation, right? I mean, based on me, like, I'm not just gonna be like, if someone's experiencing pain, right? I'm not, and they're telling me their life story. I'm not just gonna be like, listen, dude, you gotta identify. You gotta stop identifying with your thoughts, all right? Like, stop that suffering in order to have peace, right? Like, maybe if the conversation goes there, but I'm not even willing to say that, like, thank them, because I know, and this can kind of go back to, like, you know, when you first get into spirituality, you feel like you're above everyone else, like, you know so much, right? I'm not trying to say that, but like, you have a deeper knowledge, right, and understanding of what's going on. But in order for you to say that to someone, right, requires them to be willing to go to that level of deep understanding, being willing to hear it, and for you to even know it at that point too. So I just always feel like there's this deeper truth that we aren't even aware of, right? It's just so complex, and even though we may think we know it and feel like, oh yeah, this is the solution, oftentimes, more often than not, it's not. So
I don't know why. I literally have no idea why this thought is so pressing to me right now. I have no idea why. It seems unrelated, but it is at the same time. So I don't mean to just fucking go on a complete tangent.
You're good.
But the whole time you were talking about learning how to separate yourself and create that peace, the whole time I was thinking about this practice. It's not really a meditative practice. It's more of a relationship practice. And every time Jordan Peterson talks about it. How many times have I fucking said that sentence? He talks about how if you want to improve your relationships with people, that when you're interacting with them, focus on anything that they're doing or saying or any of their behaviors or anything that they do that you like. And the second that they do it or say it or act out whatever it is that you like, immediately positively reinforce them for it. Notice it. Point it out. Say it. Because then they're going to do it again in the future. And for me, with my mind, because I'm such an extrovert, I'm such a thinker, I'm such a, heavy communicator, to where at least I feel like my mind is always, go, 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 go. And for me, a good first step is that process. Because then it helps me, A, shut the fuck up and listen, but B, it really helps me separate myself from my thoughts and start focusing on other things rather than hopping in the car and driving down this rabbit hole of thought. And like when I'm talking to you or when I'm talking to somebody else and I'm focusing on how can I praise you for anything that you're saying or doing right now, it pulls me right out of my own head and puts me right into the present moment. Yeah. And it puts me in this for me, it's a meditative space of how can I praise this person to make their life better and simultaneously make my life better by positively reinforcing them for something that I like that they did. Like if you like when you do anything with, reaching out to people or something like that. Like I know I already gave that example one time, but like that's a good example of like the second I hear you say something like that, I want to positively reinforce you for that. Or, the example Jordan Peterson gives is when one of his clients' son was an annoying ass, and he couldn't deal with him at the dinner table because he was so obnoxious. And he gave him this advice, and then all of a sudden, every single time after dinner, his dad would praise him on the things. He's like, when you said this in this way, it was funny and it was witty, but it wasn't annoying. And I like that you said that. And I think you should do more of that. And then the next dinner, 99% of the things that his son was saying at dinner were witty and funny and not annoying because he just praised him for the right things. And Jordan Peterson talks about it when he's grading papers. Every single time he grades a paper and he points out, like, this was good. Like, 99% of your essay was dog shit. But I'm not going to point that out. I like this. This was good because of X, Y, and Z. Then the next essay that they wrote was all that. All of what he wanted to see, which was making them a good writer and making their essays simultaneously better to read at the same process. Wow. That has fucking nothing to do with what we were talking about.
No. I think it does a lot. Because what I was trying to think there is, like, when you make that type of comment, right? Like, so you point out something about someone that you like about them, right? Or, and they naturally will start to do that more often. I was trying to like think about like that is like a mindful practice, right? Because every time you do that, right, like you take it, whether you naturally do it or you like kind of take a step back, just like you're focused. You like, whoa, like it's like it's like that. Hey, I'm not my thoughts, right? Like just like that. You're working on your attention muscle, right? Yeah. That kind of pullback towards like you as a being, right? You become that extended awareness. It's the cultivation of your attention, right? Because in other words, you focus on your own focus, right? And so not that specifically, but you focus actually in a sense, yes and no, because like both it can be. So like you draw back, right? And then let's just say I like your socks or what I like the way your socks are like kind of hung down or whatever like that or whatever, right? So like I consciously with me, I make that realization like, okay, maybe I should point out something positive about something that's going on right now. Or like I have that natural instinct that I like your socks folded up a little bit, right? That in itself, I feel like is a drawback, and maybe I'm wrong about this. That in itself, I feel like is a drawback to being present once again, right? And through that, like I think that's very interesting because, and it's such a great method because I find like, or at least when you comment about something on me or like I comment about you, it makes me feel really good, you know, right? And it's just like you're just not only are you helping yourself, but you're helping other people at the same time too. And that I feel like could be a practice so many people could do. And David Meltzer talks about this all the time.
Yeah.
He said every time he has a negative thought, right, he just replaces it with a positive one, right? And so it's just like he recognizes the negative thought, right? Is consciously aware of it, draws it back into himself, right? He makes that realization, right? And then he replaces it with a positive one, right? So it's just like in general terms, it's that same type of drawback, right? And realization that you're aware of what's going on, right? And that really is the key here, and what we've pretty much based this whole episode on.
Yeah, it's crazy too. It's like the second I started applying that principle to my relationships,
it's life changing.
Like everybody wants to spend time with you, and you love spending time with people way more because they're doing what you want them to do. It's like it's not that they're your puppet, but you're positively reinforcing them for things that you like. It's not bullshit.
No, you genuinely like it, yeah.
If every time your husband or wife walks in the door, let's say you want them to give you a hug and a kiss when they come home from work. When they come home, if every single time they give you a hug and a kiss, you say, you know what? 10 minutes ago when you walked in and you walked over to me and gave me a hug and a kiss, it made me feel really loved, and it made me so proud to be your wife or your husband because it made me feel like, you really care and you're really compassionate. I know you had a long day, but I just want you to know that I recognized it and it was amazing and thank you for that. You know how many times they're going to do that shit after just saying it once? They're going to do that shit every fucking time. That's going to light their day up. And it's going to make you feel great in the process.
Yeah.
Like, do it. But people, every time I bring that up to somebody, they hate it because they think like they're looking at it like they're Ivan Pavlov with ringing the bell and trying to, condition a dog to salivate at the sound of a bell because they think they're just trying to like manipulate someone into some voodoo shit. It's like, I mean, so you kind of are, but you are either consciously or unconsciously. If you walk in and every time your husband or wife is on their phone, you make a stupid comment about how annoying they are, like, well, every time I fucking come home, you're just sitting there on your fucking phone and you can't even come up and say hi to me. Like, you're negatively reinforcing them every time they come home. And so every time they walk in the door and they see your face, they don't even know why. They just fucking feel like shit. You're negatively reinforcing them there, but like, you just don't think about it.
Yeah.
You should be consciously aware of it because you're always training everybody that's around you. You always are, whether you'd like to or not.
Yeah.
You may as well choose things that are going to power you and them at the same time.
Yeah, because you develop certain expectations for certain people, right? Yeah. And certain behaviors around certain people, and those become the norms, and that becomes like naturally accepted. So like, I don't see why not. Like, it's like the same thing Joe said last week or a couple weeks ago on your podcast. He was just like, if people take advantage of me, I'm okay with it. Like, unless like if that makes them happy, obviously, fairness and what's just, right? Like there are boundaries there, but like, if it's like a trivial type of situation, right, that really doesn't not make a huge impact, right?
Call for it,
yeah. Like fuck it, dude. Like why not, man? Like honestly, dude. Even if you're not being the most genuine, like fuck it, bro. Like, I mean, I'm sure there's a counter argument there, but oh well.
Fuck you.
Fuck you, dude. No. But damn, dude, it was a good discussion.
It was.
I think that's a great place to wrap up. Episode number 73 of the Conscious Cast. I'm your host, Cal, along with my other boy, Mr. Jason Scaloro. Where can they find you, my man?
Anywhere.
But
TikTok.
All right, guys. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that has been episode number 73 of the Conscious Cast. I'm your host, Cal, along with my other boy, Mr. Jason Scalora. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe on this YouTube video. Make sure you check out the most previous one, linked down below in the description. So, love yourself because I love you. Stay handsome, and we are clocking out, people. peace. You are whole, you are complete, and you are one with all that is.
Stay handsome. I say that.
Okay, fine. You want to do it again?
No, stay handsome.
You gotta do it again. Why did you turn down the music, dude? You totally killed the vibe.
You killed my vibe. You inverted my penis.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's been episode number 73 of the Conscious Cast. Please turn down the music just a tad, maybe up a little bit. Yeah, right there. All right, guys. All right, you are whole, you are complete, you are one with all that is. Love yourself because I love you.
Stay handsome.
And we are clocking up, people.
Stay handsome. Stay
Peace.
handsome. Oh, that's pretty cool. I've never heard the end.
Wow. You learn something new every day.